Harsh but fair. Yeah. So, um, for those of you who weren't here, um, don't worry. We're going to be reviewing the same content tonight because Judges kind of reviews it. But we got an intro to how the people walked into the land. So they went into the Holy Land. Um, Joshua died, and they were tasked with taking over their parts of the land, driving the people out. Right? They're supposed to drive the people that are there out, drive them completely out. Um, and it didn't go so good, as they say in Israel. It was not so good. So they they the people to varying degrees, all the tribes failed to varying degrees. Um, Dan, especially, as Kessa implied, and instead of driving people out, got driven out themselves. So high five, Dan. The uh, the what was interesting was we kind of got excuses last week about why, right? Like, these guys, especially from Judah. Judah's like, we did good. We did everybody except for the people in the plains because they had iron chariots and we didn't, so we didn't really try to do that. Um, yeah, we didn't want to fight the chariots, but everybody else we did. We can't expect us to fight chariots, right? And we took out giants, so that's yay for that. But yes, they failed to drive the people out. So, um, what's going to happen tonight is we're going to first kind of get God's thoughts on this, and then the author of Judges is going to back up, and they're going to briefly review what was just covered, and then he's going to go forward and talk about some things we haven't covered. So he's kind of going to give the themes here. We've talked about the themes, but we'll see him highlighted again tonight. He's setting up the process, the themes that we can be looking for, and then next week we're actually going to get into what the book is named after, the specific judges. So, can I have a volunteer to read verses 1 through 5 of chapter 2? Go ahead, Joe.
And the angel of the Lord came up to Gilgal to Bochum, and said, I made you to go up out of Egypt, and have brought you unto the land which I swore to your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have ye done this? Wherefore I also said, have them out from before you. But they shall be as thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare unto you. And it came to pass, when the angel of the Lord spake these words unto all the children of Israel, that all the people lifted up their voice and wept. And they called the name of that place Bochum, and they sacrificed there unto the Lord.
Thank you. All right. So we have some like a movement here. Where the angel of the Lord go from Gilgal to Bachim. So where's Gilgal? Yeah, so we're not totally sure. There is the question is where is Gilgal? It is inside the promised land. Wow, you guys are on it tonight. It is on Earth, yes. Um, it is on the western side of the Jordan River. So it's just when the people cross over the Jordan. This is where the first place they stop to camp. So um,
Oh.
yeah, this is where they get right with God. They do the circumcision, which they hadn't done for the new generation yet. And It's right before all the battle starts, where this place they stop at this place and get right with God. A lot of people aren't circumcised, so they get that taken care of. They kind of dedicate themselves to the task that they have to do here, and then they move into the promised land, and start fighting. So that's Gilgal. Now, in verse 2, we have the Lord moving from there to Bochim. So, what does Bochim mean?
I already looked.
What does it mean, Kess?
The note says it means weepers.
Yeah, weeper's place of weeping. Yeah, yep, to weep. So, already when we read that, we go, "Ooh, that's not going to be so good." Um, we have the Spirit of the Lord moving from kind of this promising beginning to this place of weeping, and then we find out why. Because he kind of declares judgment on the Israelites here. And what does he have to say about kind of their excuses from chapter 1 about, oh, we couldn't take these people, and Dan got pushed back, and these guys had iron chariots. I've got all these excuses. What does he have to say about their excuses? Yeah, he's not particularly impressed. Um, he reviews with them, right? He says, I brought you up out of Egypt, brought you into the land that I swore to your fathers, and said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altar. Okay? So he's saying your excuses are invalid, right? He says, look, I've taken you up from Egypt. I promised your fathers and you that I would never break my covenant with you. So why are you telling me that you couldn't drive some of these people out? Because I gave you the power to do so, right? So he tells them, you shall I said, I'll never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land, which means you're not gonna declare um, a treaty with them until after you've driven them out. You're not gonna make any covenant with them. You're not gonna make agreement with them, and you shall break down their altars. But you have not obeyed my voice. What is it that you have done? So they've disobeyed. They have not followed that because they have not broken down the altars. They've made covenants with these people, um, which is not part of the agreement, right? They broke the agreement. Yeah. So what's the consequence, right? He's not impressed with their excuses. What does he what does he uh prescribe as a consequence?
What they weren't doing is going to become permanent now.
Yeah. What we see throughout the Old Testament, specifically in um Exodus, Joshua, Judges, Kings, actually even Samuel, as a consequence for people's actions, God gives them what they wanted. Um, which is kind of unsettling in a lot of ways. So they wanted the people here, they wanted to serve these people's gods. So God basically says, "Okay, if that's what you want, that's what you're gonna get." And it's not gonna be like you thought it was gonna be. Yeah, so the people that they didn't drive out are now gonna stay. Yep, and they're gonna be a thorn in their sides, and their gods will be a snare to them. So these people are gonna be a continual problem for the people of Israel. And we'll talk more about that in some of the later sections tonight. But yeah, so he basically says, "Okay, what you want, you're going to get then. That's gonna be your consequence." In verse 4, as soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept. And because of that, they called the name of the place Bochim, and they sacrificed there to the Lord. So a bad omen, right? We see foreshadowing here. We see that this is this is not looking good for the Israelites. Anything else jump out at you guys from this first 5 verses?
Interesting that it mentions they sacrifice to the Lord specifically.
Yeah. Your link reminded me. Uh, again, we see the phrase "went up" here to Bochim. The link puts it at kind of near Bethel. Um, there's some good textual evidence for that. We don't know exactly where this is, but if you look at the topo map on that link, you can see Gilgal and then Bochim. It's sort of northwest, but the really important thing is that it's a higher elevation. So we think of go up as go north in a Western sense, and when the Bible uses it, it usually means elevation change. So it's further up geographically, and further into the promised land, further in. Those of you Narnia fans in here, Uh, but not necessarily in a good way, right? We see that as the Spirit of God has moved further into the promised land, where it's kind of permanently reside in the Israelites' mind. Um, the first thing that God does is declare judgment on them. So we see that right at the beginning of the book, and we see the movement, and we go, "Oof, this is going to be a tough ride." Yeah, and like Hessa said, the people acknowledge that, and they sacrifice, realizing that this is not a good thing. All right, can I volunteer to read verses 6 through 10? Go ahead, Kess.
When Joshua dismissed the people of Israel went each to his inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. And they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gaash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel.
Thank you. Okay, so Joshua here dies, which is odd because he already died earlier in the book. What's going on?
Bob, I stopped typing because I thought you were actually going to answer.
Bob is correct. We take a TARDIS went back in time. He's right about part of that statement. I don't know about the TARDIS, but we did go back in time. Yeah. So this is that zooming out that we talked about, right? So now that God has given his declaration of what's going to happen, the author is zooming back a little bit and going to go over the big picture. He's going to explain the process that we talked about the first night that we had this study. So, so we're looking back now at when Joshua was alive, and then they took possession of the land, and then he died. And during the time when Joshua was alive, the people served served the Lord pretty well, right? We see that because they remembered the great work that the Lord has done to Israel. So the people had seen some of these wonders, and they did pretty well. Now, again, not perfect, right? Because we saw that they didn't drive the people all the way out of the land, but at least they followed God. But then, in verse 10, all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, the generation of Joshua, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that the Lord had done for Israel. Okay, what's going on here? Have these people never heard of God? Go ahead, Cass.
It implies to me that while they had heard the stories, they did not take them to heart. It was just not personal to them. They didn't really internalize it. It seems like they did know the facts, but it didn't mean anything important to them.
Yep. We've seen this, right? We've not just seen this in the Bible. We've seen it in life too. People who have grown up maybe in a Christian family or a family that follows God, and they themselves, um, it's they're Christian, in quotes, because that's what their family does, but they themselves haven't had an experience or have not committed themselves to following God. So they know the stories, but it's not them, right? It's not what they choose to do with their lives. So the generation that has seen God work, powerfully on defeating some of these Canaanite armies and whatnot, they die away. The children come up and they're like, that's cool and all. We know who God is, but instead of following God, they choose to serve the Canaanite gods. Or maybe they do, they pay lip service to God, but they also follow the Canaanite gods, and they go, I can follow both, right? That's cool. That'll work. That does not work, incidentally. Spoiler alert. So the idea for know there, that word yada, is not a word that implies a head knowledge. It's an actual intimate relationship with God. So they might have a head knowledge of God. They might intellectually understand who God is, but they're not following Him. They don't have a relationship with Him. They're not orienting their life in a way that shows that they know who God is or the work that God has done for Israel. So a little bit of foreshadowing there, right? That bodes ill. All right. Can I volunteer to read verses 11 through 15? Go ahead, Joe.
And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they and served Baal and Ashtaroth. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he delivered them into the hands of spoilers that spoiled them. And he sold them into the hands of their enemies round about, so that they could not any longer stand before their enemies. To the verse 16.
Yep.
Wheresoever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil. And the Lord had said, and as the Lord had sworn unto them, and they were greatly distressed. Nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges, which delivered them out of the hand of those that spoiled them.
Thank you. I love the King James use of spoiled there. Spoiler alert. It's a good old word. Okay, thank you. So, the people do what is because they don't know God, right? They aren't in a relationship with Him. They choose not to follow Him. They do what's evil in the sight of the Lord, and they serve the Baals. Now, Baal is a specific Canaanite god. Ashtoreth is also a specific Canaanite god, but word here is used plurals to mean false gods, right? There's more than just Baal and Ashtoreth. Um, there's many here. Um, so although Baal was one of the main ones when I was in the Israel Museum, they had lots of little Baal Canaanite gods they dug up. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, so the people abandon God and they go after the Baals. And then what happens is there's an irony here. What's the irony? Yeah. So taking Dan out of the picture, because as the chat has said tonight, nobody cares about Dan, or Dan. But taking Dan out of the picture, how did most of the rest of the Canaanites stay in the land from the tribes that were trying to push them out? Did they do it through their own martial prowess, their own skill in arms, or was it something else? Yep, true. But what sorts of treaties were signed? Who was kind of in control and who was the servant in most of these circumstances? Yeah, so a lot of these treaties, what I'm trying to get at is the people were allowed to stay in the land so that they could be kind of servants or vassals or people who are gonna do stuff for the Israelites, right? It wasn't a mercy thing; it was a convenience thing. It's like, hey, free labor, free tax money, yay! Um, for the Israelites. So the Israelites kept these people in to kind of serve them. But then what the Israelites do to their gods? The Israelites choose to serve their gods. And then because the Israelites choose to serve the gods of these people that they kept for their own kept around for their own convenience, then the Israelites wind up going into bondage to those people. Does that sound familiar? Is there any conclusion or anything we can draw from that in the application for us? I'm gonna get to Kessa's question in a moment here. Yeah, so if we think about it in terms of sin, which is I think of pretty it's not a stretch. It's a analogy that I think the the Israelites would be able to take from this text too. What happens when we just in our lives tolerate a sin? We're like, hey, I'm just going to do this. I'm still going to serve God, right? But maybe I'm going to submit to sin in some area. Maybe I'm going um, to cheat on my spouse, to cheat on a test, to just steal a little bit from my employer over here, a little bit. I'm still in control, right? I'm disobeying God in this one area. Yeah, Joe's got it. Guess what? You don't get sin to serve you. You wind up serving sin. I was talking to somebody the other day, and it was about this one cop who had gone corrupt. Now, I'm a specific instance. I'm not trying to make a political commentary here, but it was one cop talking about another cop who was a bad cop. That he was dealing drugs, he was taking bribes, he was beating prisoners. This is not a usual thing. It was one bad guy in this one area, and it was during his hearing. And the judge asked him, like, "How'd you go down this path?" And he goes, "Yeah, I made one bad decision to try and make some money one day, early in my career." And he's like, "And now 5 years later, I look back, and that decision wound up taking over by the end. He thought he was just gonna do it this one time and just do this one thing that he could control. He can just make a little money on the side here by breaking some rules, and next thing you know, he's totally gone dark, gone to be, one of the people he's supposed to be trying to protect society against, right?" And the cop I was talking to about it goes, "Is that's if that isn't the most applicable thing for all of us, I don't know what is, right?" We make one compromise, or we make one decision to consciously defy God or to break the rules or to do the wrong thing, and we think we can control this, and all of a sudden we turn around later, and that sets us on a trajectory where we're looking up, and now sin is running the show, right? And that's what happened here. The Israelites are like, we're gonna let some of these people stay, we're let some of the gods be here. It won't be that big a deal. It'll be good for us. We can control this. And within a generation, the people that they let stay are running the show, and they're serving the gods of those people because because those people are running the show, right? Yeah. It'll nom your life. Yeah, exactly, like a virus, yeah. And this is scary. This isn't something we like to talk about in today's day and age because we like talking about positive things and the freedom we have, and that's all good. But this is meant to be scary. This should be scary because it is scary, right? We when you make compromises, there's consequences for it. And like I said, God tells his people, "I'm gonna give you what you wanted, and you're gonna find out that it's not what you thought it was." And that's what's happening to the Israelites here. Yeah. And we see this in the New Testament too, right? We're told that we're made free, so don't go back into the bondage of sin. And that's what the Israelites do here. They're made free, and then they're like, actually, bondage. I like that better. The grass is always greener when it comes to sin. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not being political. We're not bringing politics in the Bible study. But so I was talking to one of my friends this week, and I thought that analogy fit pretty well with the making, yeah, look, makes one moral compromise and then looks up 5 years later and is all of a sudden serving sin. He's on the wrong side of things. All right. Um, we see that the Israelites start losing and losing badly in battle. And why are they losing? Yeah. You guys, Joe and Kessa both have it. Because they decided to serve the false gods, God's like, okay, I'll fight against you then. You don't want me to be on your side? We can do it. We can do it that way, right? So it says specifically that God went out and gave them into the hands of their enemies in verse 14 and 15, right? Um, I like the way that the King James put it when Joe read, gives them over to the spoilers who spoiled them, or the plunderers who plundered them in ESV. He sold them into the hand of surrounding enemies so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Verse 15, whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them for harm, as the Lord had warned, and as he had sworn to them, and they were in terrible distress. So previously God had fought for them. And then they're like, yeah, nah, not loving that. I'm gonna serve these other gods instead. So God's like, okay, well, we can do it the other way. And he goes out and fights against them and causes them specifically to lose. One of my friends was was reading a book called God Wants You to Win. I was like, I'm not sure what I think of that title. He goes, what do you think he wants you to lose? Well, in this specific instance, yes, he wants them to lose. Um, so yes, he's fighting against them. Now that's tough, right? That's tough for us to wrap our minds around because these are his people that he chose, right? Why is he allowing them to lose? Why is not he that's allowing them to lose? Why is he causing them to lose? Yeah, you guys got it. Good. To learn, discipline, to repent, remind them who their God is. Yes, exactly. Yep. Good. It's not just to punish them, it's to discipline them. So it's to draw them back to him, to have them realize this is bad, this is destructive, right? Call this negative reinforcement. Is technical term for this. Yeah. All right. So let's see what happens next. And again, this is the cycle that we talked about the first week. And we're going to see it summarized by the author here. So verses 16 through 23. Can I have a volunteer to read those? Go ahead, ABW.
So 16 to 23.
Yep.
Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the land, out of the hand of those who'd plundered them. Yet they did not listen to their judges, for they whored after gods, they bowed down to them. They soon turned aside a way in which their fathers had walked, who had obeyed the commands of the Lord, and they did not do so. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge. He saved them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved by the pity of their groaning, because those who had afflicted and oppressed them. But whenever the judge died, they turned back and were more corrupt than their fathers, going after other gods, serving them and bowing down to them. They did not drop any of their practices or their stubborn ways. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And he said, because this people have transgressed my covenant that I have commanded their fathers, and not have obeyed my voice, I will no longer drive them out before any of the nations of Joshua left when he died, in order to test Israel by them, whether they will not take care to walk in the way of the Lord as their fathers did or not. So the Lord left those nations, not driving them out quickly. He did not give them into the hand of Joshua.
Thank you. All right. So we see the cycle summed up here, right? Of idolatry, bondage, repentance, deliverance, rest, and from the top, right? Again, idolatry, bondage, repentance, deliverance, rest, and over and over and over. Because the Lord raises up judges, and they save them out of the hand of those who plundered them. So they get saved out of the hand of the plunderers. They get delivered from the people. But then they don't listen to the judges, and it says they whored after other gods and bowed down. And it's kind of an uncomfortable analogy, but one of the commentaries I was reading pointed out that that if you're whoring after something, it means that you're not even really going after it because you want it. It's because you're looking for some sort of like financial gain. You get something out of it, right? So they're leaving the god that they have a commitment to go after these other gods because they think they can get something out of it, and they don't get good things out of it. But that's why you serve gods in the ancient Near East. Um, Kessa had a point up that I want to bring into this, um, about how isn't it weird that they took on the conquered people's gods? Isn't that kind of weird for even the ancient Near East? It's not without precedent. There is a line about Greece that Greece conquered Rome by being conquered by Rome because when Rome took over Greece, Rome looked at all their gods and like, hey, this is kind of cool. What if we use these gods? Um, the Israelites do that too, but it makes less sense because the Israelite gods the Israelite God rather is specifically personally speaking to them and giving them victory. And they look around, they're like, "Hey, we could use other gods. Why might they do that?" Okay, the one thing that is, especially with Ashtoreth, um, pretty universal amongst ancient Near East gods is there's usually a sexual component to the worship. There's usually temple prostitutes that you sleep with to try and please the god. So more likely than not, there's something about that that appeals to the Israelites, which I mean shouldn't really surprise us, knowing what we know about human nature um, and our own culture. So they look at that and they're like, "Hey, there's things out of this that I can get right," and maybe they think maybe it's best to hedge my bets, right? It's I can serve multiple gods, and then if all I have to do in order to beat my enemies or get pregnant or have rain on my crops is you know make a sacrifice to their god or sleep with the temple prostitute, maybe that's not such a bad deal, and God will be okay with that, right? And he's not okay with that, and that's why they use that verb there. They hoard after other gods because God takes that as seriously as a spouse would somebody committing adultery. Um, or going out and and prostituting themselves in the streets after they've already been married, right? It'd be a shameful thing. That's how God views this. Yeah, exactly. So they soon turned aside from the way that their fathers walked within one generation, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord, and they did not do so. So then it says, whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, they saved them from the hands of the enemy, because the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning, because of those who were afflicted and oppressed them. So God loves these people, and like a loving father, he doesn't want to have to punish them, right? So as soon as they show signs of repentance, he gives them a judge and goes, "Okay, like now let's turn around and not do this anymore." But it says in verse 19, "But whenever the judge died, they turned back and were more corrupt than their fathers." More corrupt than their fathers. What did we say one of the themes of Judges was? Pretty much. Yeah, Judges is that song, more or less. Yeah, it's a cycle, right? But it's a downward cycle. So each judge gets worse, and they start kind of sketchy. Again, we'll talk about that with each judge, but each one, even the good ones early on, have something with them culturally where we look at that and go, "Ugh, there's something kind of off here. Maybe he's not a full Israelite. Maybe he's left-handed. Maybe maybe he's not a he. Maybe he's a she. Um, Not in a 2019 way, but maybe the judge is a woman. um, but they're morally good, but they've got these things where it's like, okay, somebody at that time with the prejudice of the time would go, huh, this is kind of not ideal. And then it goes from there to really bad pretty quick, actually. So there's 12. We talked about that, but they get worse one after the other. So, and that's showing us that, hey, these are the best people, right? The judge is going to be the best person of that generation, the one closest to God. And if the one closest to God is a foreigner or somebody who's left-handed, which is a sign of something being wrong with them from birth, in the ancient Near East. Nothing against you left-handed guys. My best friend is left-handed. I give him crap about it all the time. Or maybe that person who's closest to God is a woman, which again, not a bad thing. Just it would be a warning sign of these people if the person who's closest to God is a woman in the country at the time. Maybe if those are the people who are the best, the closest to God, the only ones following God, and then it gets worse from there, it's a downward cycle, right? Chat's broken out into a song. That's how I know it's time to move on. So the cycle is pointed out here and highlighted here. We'll talk about that more in the coming weeks. Then we get this weird thing here about how God mentions that he will not drive out any of the nations that Joshua left here when he died, and it says that he did not give them into the hand of Joshua to test the people because of how they went away from him. What's going on here? It seems like the timeline's getting all bendy. I should probably not join in on the saying in the chat. Probably encouraging bad behavior.
Does God want to let play out the fact of just how bad they can be?
Maybe. Because it does seem like a Doctor Who, like, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey sort of thing here, right? Because we're getting an explanation for a future event that uses a past event about something that the Israelites are experiencing. Go ahead, Kess.
Is it that God, foreseeing their unfaithfulness, left these other nations there in order to have a handy hammer, so to speak?
That seems to me to be what the author is saying here. Is that God is using the immediate consequence from their disobedience to continue to be there, so he has a a consequence ready, like you said, a handy hammer, sort of a consequence for the future generations too, for what they're going to do wrong. So it's less of a looking into the future thing, but more of an integrated process, right? They're seeing it as kind of a he's using the immediate consequence to also set them up for um to to be able to learn through future mistakes. It's kind of a mind bending, like headache inducing thing, but the author is using it here to show, hey, this is all part of the same story, right? It's this is the 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 cycle began at the beginning is going to continue to play out throughout all these generations. So it's um, almost like all the generations are experiencing the same thing, only it's getting worse and worse. All right. So, what do we learn from this week? What do we take away from this? Yeah. Don't worship other gods, says ABW. So what does that mean for us? I mean, I don't think that many of us are going to be bowing down before a Baal this week. Um, we don't have an Ashtoreth in our city square yet in my city. Go ahead, Cass.
It seems like the way the Israelites keep turning to these other gods, they seem convinced that, yeah, the Lord did this and that, but these gods are going to meet their real needs, or the needs that they really want met. There's some kind of desire for what these gods are offering that is troubling, and maybe fear on the Israelites' part that God won't continue to be faithful in the future, which that rings true with me.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a very good summary. Go ahead, Reb. Reb, if you're talking, you're muted. Still muted, Reb.
Hey, there we go. Can you hear me?
Oh, it works.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm driving, so I was having a hard time with that. Yes, essentially what I said, one sin can impact a generation and can continue to impact generations past it. It's just giving into it that one time can cause a tidal wave effect and can just repeat the process over and over again.
Yep. Yep, I agree. Joe had a good point in the chat that I want to point out too. Don't replace your relationship with God with a relationship with sin. Ties into what Kessa was saying. And again, that's why people served other gods in the ancient Near East because they thought they could get something out of them that they couldn't get out of their god or another god. Yeah, Bob. Every time, yep, exactly. Every time you give it a temptation, it gets easier next time. You may think I have this under control and I'm just gonna do this one time to get something out of it, or maybe just to kind of let off the pressure of temptation a little bit. We kind of justify, but you're not weakening the power of that. You're strengthening it by doing so. These people left the gods of the Canaanites in their land so that the Canaanites could serve them and that they get something out of it. And all of a sudden, they turn around and they're serving the Canaanites and their gods, right? And that's how sin is. So don't listen to the lies of temptation. Temptation tells us, hey, if I just do this, it'll be great, right? If I just you know, ha- I'm trying to think of different examples. If I just steal a little bit of money from my employer here, if I just cheat on this one test, if I just, um, you know, uh, cheat with my girlfriend on this over here, then everything's going to be great, right? I'll just have what I want, and it does not work that way. Yep. What else? Anything else? All right, I'll close with this, and then we can take prayer requests. Galatians, from a Christian perspective, we always look at this a little bit differently, right? It's important to look at it in the cultural context, like we talked about, the historical context. We also have the New Testament that looks back on these things, comments, right? Galatians 5, verse 1, recent Galatian study, says, "For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery." So we've been set free from sin in Christ. Don't go back in and voluntarily submit to slavery of sin by choosing to give in a temptation this week. Don't do it. Don't do what the Israelites did. Don't go and voluntarily serve these false gods this week. All right. That's what I got. The we'll take prayer requests for the closing. I have two.